Yep, we are back with the third part of today's current review with Central News Live. I'm still Tiisetso Makhele from the TT Hookup. That podcast, then please go onto YouTube, type the TT Hookup. You will find us there. We are, if you don't type the TT Hookup, you can also search for Black Economics. We are there on YouTube. Subscribe. We need your support very much, man. We are talking about a variety of things there, you know, a lot of important things, from anything, entertainment to politics to business and economics. And we've got 2 new episodes that are running there. Please go and support, watch, and suggest new content for us. But right now we are with Central News Current Review, and I am going to be joined by an ideologue, one of the ideologues of our province, somebody who writes what he likes and he likes what he writes, an African Marxist, Tiisetso Makhele, and we're going to talk about an important piece that he wrote in the past few days, which talks to the economic structure of our country, of our province in particular. And I think he's making some important observations there. So we'll just be talking about that. Good day, Ntate Makhele.
Good day, Ntate Tiisetso, and good day to the viewers as well.
Thank you very much, man. I think let's just get to it quickly before we lose a lot more time. In your article, which you will talk to us about, you raised a very important economic questions there, but there's a few things that I want us to talk about. For example, you emphasize the importance of economic transformation over economic growth. Would you please elaborate for us as to why you believe economic transformation is more crucial in addressing the challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment in the Free State? And why there is a difference between economic transformation versus economic growth?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Let me firstly thank Central News Media Group for affording me an opportunity to share my views with members of the community. Firstly, through allowing my article to be published on their platform, but secondly, for giving me this opportunity again to further elaborate. It is community media houses like this that actually give us hope that the Free State will rise. So thank you very much. First and foremost, in order for us to actually deal or address the challenges of the economy of the Free State and the country at large, it is quite important for us to conduct a deeper analysis of that particular economy. Now, we must not look at the symptoms of the economic problems that we have. Now, your symptoms are what economists would refer to as economic indicators. They indicate to you that there are certain challenges in the economy, and those indicators are, amongst others, issues like economic growth rate. If the economic growth rate is going up or down, it's just a symptom. The Gini coefficient, which therefore calculates inequalities in a particular country or a province, that is another indicator. But also the issue of unemployment rate. So those are the indicators. You must not only look at those, because if you are only looking at those and say, I want to address unemployment rate without necessarily understanding the fundamental issues that actually affect that economy, you are going to have a problem. It is like a doctor when you go to a medical doctor and he just looks at the symptoms and he deals with the symptom. Tomorrow you are coming back again, your health has deteriorated because they did not deal with the fundamental issues. They did not diagnose the problem. Now, I'm a proponent or a follower of a philosophy that is called dialectical materialism, which then encourages us to look at a problem from the inside, from the deep, below the surface and on the sides. Now, to come to your question, if you are only going to look at the concept of economic growth, which is but a symptom, you're not going to address the fundamental issues that face that economy. But if you are going to look at economic transformation, it is much broader. in that you want to transform an economy if there are structural challenges. So transformation is much broader. Now, given the legacy of apartheid and colonialism, our economy has got structural shocks or structural problems. For example, you have an economy that has got high levels of concentration, market concentration, in that you have a fewer number of companies in a particular sector that are dominating that sector. They are huge, but they are few, and new entrants cannot get into that market because of difficulty in terms of entry levels, because of that high concentration. Now, that is a structural problem of the economy that we have. For an example, in 2019, the University of the Free State Center for Development Studies released a report. That report was only zooming on the agricultural sector in the province. It says that there are about 9 or 10 large companies that are dominating that particular sector. Your Itau, your OVK, your Senves. And most of those companies are family owned, white owned. So you've got a structural problem in terms of ownership patterns still reflects the legacy of apartheid. White males are dominating. It's a structural problem. You have to deal with it. Also issues of gender. There's also issues of inability for new entrants to enter the market. Now, the second one is we've got an economy that has got heavy reliance on the export of primary goods and then import it back as processed products. That in itself is a challenge because you are now exporting job opportunities. That is why you have high unemployment, because you just take out a potato from the ground and you send it to Mpumalanga. And then when it comes back, it is Simba chips. Those who processed it to be Simba chips have got job opportunities, and you are left with what? Just a consumer. It's a structural problem of the Free State economy. Another one relates to the sectors of our economy. Sectors are very important. Now, the Free State's economy is the economy where the community sector or government is the highest employer. And that in itself is a challenge because government cannot, it is not sustainable for government to be a creator of jobs. In the long term, you're going to have problems. So that is why the last one is the issue of the balloon, what I call the balloon economy. The Free State is a balloon economy. If you can just bring a needle just with one hole, it will crash. And it is similar to the economy of the country. You cannot have a situation where the financial sector is the biggest economy, because it is not the real economy. For example, when somebody buys a house this year, it is 100,000. 5 years when he sells that house, it is 150,000. What led to that increase in the price? Because there's no increase in terms of jobs that have been created. There's no increase in terms of the real production. So it is a bubble. It is showing you as if it is growing, but it is not growing. So those four are what I call the structural shocks of the economy, and you need transformation to address those before you even go to the symptoms, because by dealing with those issues through transformation, you will then address unemployment, inequality, as well as unemployment.
No, the question and a comment that I would make after what you are saying now is something that I would have wanted to ask at the end of this session of ours, but let me dispense with it now. Somebody says, I know you are very familiar with this, that the philosophers have interpreted the world and its problems. However, the objective is to change it. Now, we are 30 years into our new transformation, in fact, into our new. Why are we still getting the problems that our society and economy have, instead of actually implementing systems to change, the economic structure and the structure of our society generally?
That is a very wonderful question, and thank you very much for asking that question. Yesterday, I was at the Africa Industrialization Day symposium at Pretoria, and that is one of the topical issues that was raised. To say it's a problem of the whole of Africa, if not the whole of the developing countries, where you have good policies, but you are unable to implement them. You are correct. Our role must be to change, not to interpret. We have interpreted enough. even though there are still shortcomings. We have interpreted enough in terms of these are the challenges. Now, the issue of implementation. The first inhibitor of implementation is the issue of not being able to align your budget to the plan. I'll make an example. We've got what was then called the 30-year plan of government, called the National Development Plan. That National Development Plan might be good, but it is not financed. There is no dedicated budget that begins to say, in order for you to have unemployment by 2030, this is how much you need, and this is how it is going to be funded. Municipality A is going to spend 100,000 of this bulk, and so on and so on. Everybody, this ward is going to spend so much. There's no allocation against the plan, and that is the first challenge that deals with us not being able to implement. The second issue deals with the issue of government cycles. The issue of government cycles, more often than not, they disturb progress to a certain extent. I know many people who will then complain to say, why would somebody, the president of Cuba, for example, be a president for so many years? Why would Paul Kagame, for example, become a president for so many years? That is dictatorship. That is Western thinking. But if you look at countries like China, for example, they would have a 100-year plan. Whether they go to elections next year, because the one-party state, whether they go to elections next year, nothing is going to change. In fact, it's just going to be the acceleration of that particular program. So these government cycles, more often than not, sometimes they are linked to personalities and individuals. Sometimes they affect that. So this 5 year. So when you count it as 30 years, it's a lot of period, it's a lot of time. But in reality, it's a scatter of 5-year terms and even lesser terms, because sometimes people are recalled, sometimes people are redeployed from this department to that department. The DG has to move from this one. So it's a scatter, but it becomes painful when we say 30 years. So we need to look at that. The other issue has to do with the external forces. There are external forces, especially that affects all the developing countries. All nations of the world have got interest in Africa because Africa is the richest in terms of resources. So those interests, if we are unable to manage them, they then dictate and define our economic policy and trajectory. I'll make an example. The South African government has now taken a decision to borrow. Last year in 2022, it was 9 billion rand. This year is, I think, it's 2 billion rand to finance just transition and so on and so on. And you must remember that all those loans, they come with what they call conditionalities. And those conditionalities, they say you must embark on structural adjustment programs. And those programs lead to you not employing more people, reducing the number of people, reducing salaries and cost containment and all those issues. So you are unable, because now the interest of the country are competing with the interest of your creditors or your funders. So I agree with you. We have to accept that indeed we have been able to move for 30 years, but there has been little progress. But I think it can be undone.
Well, in the article, you also draw parallels with the economic strategies of the Asian tigers, for the Free State development. How can the Free State learn from the experiences of these countries, and what specific aspects of their strategies do you think, are applicable and beneficial for the Free State, for example?
Thank you very much for that opportunity. First and foremost, I want to put a disclaimer that even in the article when I wrote, I did not, and I'm not proposing that Free State or the country must copy any country, because each and every country has got their own unique conditions. So you cannot cut and paste what worked in Singapore, and then you want to copy and paste it and bring it here as if the conditions are the same. But like you are saying, there are lessons to learn, especially for countries that emerge from certain shocks, like countries like that emerged like an apartheid system, system of colonial system. There has to be a particular plan. So one of the lessons, I've written about 7 lessons. The first lesson is the role of the state. State intervention in countries that emerge from shocks, economic and political or any other shocks. It's important because it is through the state, because once you are liberal, once you allow the private sector to self-rule, you won't be able to achieve the objectives that the people who put that government to be there. Because remember, private sector is driven by profits. So if you're saying they must run healthcare, education, their interests are profit. If you want a particular set of education, you won't achieve it. So state intervention is important. And state intervention, most of the time, does not necessarily mean ownership. It means using policies and laws to direct capital, to direct the private sector, to direct society. So at the present moment, there has been moving away from radical policies to policies that are actually more liberal and they allow the private sector. So we need to allow that, because even the Asian tigers, one of the examples that I always make is that the Asian tigers were able to, at certain instances, say these 5 companies, you are involved in more or less the same sector in the manufacturing. For example, you are manufacturing chips, you are manufacturing laptops, there's the same value chain. They were able to tell them to unite and become a huge company so that they disturb the companies that were there before. So state intervention is very important through policy, but it needs also the involvement of the private sector, because we cannot do anything without the private sector. Secondly, in the case of the province, that state intervention cannot be state intervention when somebody wakes up. It must be state intervention that is documented in a plan. There must be one plan for the province. That plan must say, this is the economy that we have, and this is who and who we're going to embark upon, and this is how much this plan is going to cost us. In order for us to achieve 1, 2, 3, this is how much. So one plan led by the premier. That is also part of the state-led, but now I'm going to commonality and coordination. Because once you have a situation where this department is doing this and that department is doing that, another department is doing that, it scatters. It's not coordinated. So there must be that particular one plan actually led by the premier. The other issue is the Free State must prioritize and take advantage of its strengths. We're an agricultural province. Agriculture is at the center of this particular province. We must disallow mass exports of primary goods. We must do what in economics they call agricultural transformation, where we transform the agricultural sector from the one that is just relies on subsistence, but that where we commercialize it to a point where it's able to sustain the people. I want to applaud what the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development in the province is doing in terms of the support that they are offering to commonages. Because now in commonages, you have people who ordinarily were subsistence farmers. They used to have 2 cows, and then they breed those cows, and then those cows get old and so on. But with technology, innovation, and training that the department is providing, is going to actually empower them, but it is not enough. And it must be programmed. It must be programmed to an extent of saying each and every municipality, this is how much we are going to spend in terms of these commonages. Because these commonages, if we can turn them into massive cooperatives, they will then disturb these high levels of concentration, these large companies that are actually dominating the market. Industrialization. All these Asian tigers, all of them, they make sure that manufacturing is at the center of their economic activities. Because it is through manufacturing that you are able to grow the economy, because it is now the real economy. It's not this finance that we see taking place here. For an example, if we say we are going to ensure that all the bricks that build houses must be from this particular province, and then we say this is the funding that we are going to actually embark upon to assist those, it then means that both government and the private sector will then be able to support locally. So you also need the buy-in of the private sector, so that the private sector also understands the motive. The motive is that we want money to remain locally, which is what many countries are doing now, localization. The township economy is at the center of our development. It is important that we ensure that the township economy is reclaimed from foreign nationals. It is not being xenophobic. It is being realistic, because if that does not happen, at a later stage, what is going to happen? You're going to see community protests. You're going to see people killing each other, because people will always fight for resources and space. So you need to control that thing because before it goes into a conflict. So I'm very happy that the Free State Department, and I must state that I'm not speaking here on behalf of the department, it is in my personal capacity. But the Free State Department of Economic Development has developed what they call the Free State Local Economic Development and Transformation Bill. It is now at the legislature. One of the objectives of that particular bill is to legalize the number of certain sectors, to say certain economic activities in the townships must be limited only to locals. Issues like taverns, issues like car washes, and so on and so on. That is a big step and a bold step in the right direction to ensure that we get the township economy, because you can't live it, and township and rural economy. And then
I'd like to jump into this before you go on, especially on the point that you just made now, for the township economy. I think what I will say is somewhat controversial, but it's the truth in my view. There is an over concentration of Black people in the townships, and the townships were not necessarily created for the for the advancement and the benefit of Black people generally. In my view, there were spaces where Black labor was kept for the benefit of white advancement and white benefit. Now, I want to link this with what we are saying about developing a township economy with spaza shops and so on. For me, that sounds like it's big, definitely, but it's a small cake compared to what the white people are enjoying, the land and the benefit of being industrial in farming. How can the Free State help Black people who are in the townships who want to venture into farming as well as into industrialization?
That's a very good question. Like I said, and I did not emphasize on this point, now you are reminding me that if you look at the structure of the economy, it bears the hallmarks of the history of colonialism and apartheid. And you'll remember that one of the hallmarks of colonialism was the dispossession of land. And that issue needs to be reversed and corrected in order for us to actually ensure that there is equity and there is transformation. The land issue is at the center of also economic transformation, because land is one of the factors of production. So if people do not have land, they cannot compete on an equal basis with the people who have got the land. They are not on an equal footing. They are already behind, because and that other one has already inherited land because of a generational wealth, already have land. His is just to get funding to put a structure there and to say this is my farm and to bring animals. So Black people generally are behind economically. That is why I said, don't look at the symptoms, because if you are going to look at the symptoms, you are just going to say, no, there's high unemployment, no, there's a low economic growth rate, but you are not going to be detailed in your analysis. So I thank you for raising that question. And the land question is at the center, and that land must be for all these purposes. I see that recently, it is as if Black people only need land for residential purposes, and that should not be the case. Those are desperate people who actually go and then allocate land to themselves for residential purposes. But there are people who also want land for agricultural purposes, and they cannot all of them be in common ages. There has to be a radical approach to us addressing the issue of land. So the land must be for residential purposes, must be for religious purposes, must be for commercial purposes, where you need a block of buildings, and you say you, all of those who wants to come and operate business here, here is the area. And it must not be far where there are no clients. And the third one, it must be for industrial purposes. Land for industrial purposes. So I agree with you 100% there. You can't deal with this or other issues without dealing with all these factors of production. Factors of production, including human capital, because even the legacy of apartheid creates a situation where the Black people themselves, in terms of access to education, it's not the same. So we have to deal with those issues holistically. That is why I spoke about state intervention and one plan. So that one plan must be as holistic as possible, rather than dealing with issues one by one.
In your article, you also applaud the Free State government for formalizing the leveraging of state procurement to support SMMEs. How do you anticipate that this initiative would benefit local businesses and contribute to economic transformation in the Free State?
Thank you very much. If you say that I want to increase the number of companies, or I want to grow the manufacturing sector of the province, because I know the Free State Growth and Development Strategy that was developed in 2013 had said that the Free State wants to increase the share of manufacturing on the provincial GDP from the current 10% to 28%, from the current 13% to 28%. Now, who is going to buy those goods? If you say you want to increase manufacturing, and then on the other side, there is no market for those goods. Of course, you are giving them machinery, you are giving them industrial space, but who are they going to sell to? And knowing very well also that, again, there are also barriers to entry. Even in terms of access to markets, there are barriers to entry that actually are going to make them fail as enterprises. He might be somebody who produces bottled water, but then again, when he goes to ShopRite will tell him that we need you to go to this and this and this and this. We need you to have achieved this and this and this. And then the mortality rate of SMME goes down. Now, as a start, I'm happy that the Free State provincial government have said we need to have a platform where we are saying we prioritize local manufacturers in terms of the goods that are procured by government. If government wants to procure linen, let it not be from Durban. If government wants to procure bread, let it be local. And the extent to which you can be able to actually localize that can even go to, if the school is in Botshabelo, to what extent can you get a bread manufacturer in Botshabelo? So the preferential,
but this has implications on our legislation, like the preferential, what is called the preferential procurement framework. You know, that it's open to everybody. If anybody has got a better price, does not matter where they are from, better price, better value proposition, they can be appointed. You know, how do we mitigate those kind of things?
Yes, it means the Free State in itself must then be able to make it formal. Either maybe the provincial treasury can issue an instruction note to all the departments to say this is what needs to happen. These are the issues that you need to look into, because the preferential procurement framework, when it speaks about local, it speaks about South Africa. But it says, the amended one says, even though we are saying local is South Africa, you are able and you are empowered to actually define that local to be a ward. So it gives us that leeway. So the province can actually use that, and maybe treasury or the executive council can maybe issue out an instruction. If that even goes maybe to municipalities to say, before you procure, these are the issues that you need to look into, and this is the mandate. So that at least you're able to empower these local manufacturers, and then the industrialization works in tandem. And then in future, you then go to the private sector. You find a way to interact with private sector so that they are able also to empower Black-owned companies, companies owned by people with disabilities, women-owned companies, and small and medium enterprises, so that we do away with this massive high levels of concentration in the economy.
And you also discussed the Free State's local economic development and transformation bill. How will this bill promote local investment and stability in the townships and contribute also to the economic empowerment of local residents?
Yes, like I said, I did touch a bit on this particular bill when I said that the bill is now at the legislature. Until it is enacted, it is difficult for us to speak, but the purpose for which it was developed was to actually come up with legislation that enforces that municipalities and the department have got authority to put a quota on the number of companies that are owned by people who are not from that locality in each sector. For example, in the spaza shops, to say a municipality has got an authority to say no more than 20% of the spaza shops in this township of Tumahole, for example, should be owned by people from outside. And that should actually happen in tandem with the issue of capacity building and the issue of actually advancing leveraging on local government procurement to ensure that you empower those, so that at the time when you are actually transforming that particular sector, and then our people are already ready, so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where we put people in a corner. We say, here's an opportunity, we're enforcing this law. This is the quota. And then we are going to use legislation to ensure that those who are actually outside of this particular quota, who don't meet the requirements, because through the Business Act and many other acts, it's very easy to do away with many people who are actually in the townships who are operating spaza shops. It just needs enforcement. So that act wanted to actually formalize that and make sure that it is customized across the whole province. Because at the current moment, we are relying on bylaws, and the bylaw of one municipality is not the same as the other. And also those bylaws need enforcement, and you find that municipalities don't have the authority to enforce or the capacity. So it will turn around the economic fortunes of the people in townships to ensure that at least they are able to operate in those particular sectors, and they are then able to actually fight those malls that are encroaching in our townships.
You also emphasize the need for strengthening the tourism industry in the Free State. What specific strategies do you propose to make the province a destination of choice, and how can you capitalize on the different forms of tourism in the province?
Yes. The Free State, number one, is centrally located, meaning anybody from all these provinces can easily access it. So the issue of location in itself works on our favor. Number two is the issue of the beauty of the province, the scenic, magnificent views of the Eastern Free State and other places. If you go to Paris, the valley issues. If you don't go to the Harib, you've got tourist attractions. The other issue is that heritage. You know that many political parties were born here, so you can use that as a way to enhance tourism. In terms of also medicine, what we call health and wellness tourism, we can actually take advantage because we are in the center. It's very easy for us to be accessed, and we've got high level, high caliber hospitals or medical centers in the province. So I've dealt with issues of luxury tourism. I've dealt with issues of health. I've dealt with heritage tourism and medical tourism. So those aspects can actually work in our favor, because tourism.
There's also entertainment tourism. When you go there to Paris, there's a place called City African Vibes, which needs to be supported by the provincial government. In order to support economic growth, I just need to add there, just to disturb you.
No, I won't comment on that because you are taking advantage. I won't comment on that one. Because City African Vibes, I know it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. But the proposals you're making are very good, and they seem quite progressive. I think sometimes our economy can be quite liberal, and a lot of players in the economic space are somewhat also liberal, or have got views which may be different to yours, and you identify personally yourself as an African Marxist. Do you not think that for the very progressive ideas that you are proposing, and when somebody goes down and they read the last line of the article and they say, this man is an African Marxist, they're going to bring us these dangerous views from the past, maybe that sort of diverts the sort of attention that people should give to these particular progressive ideas that you're proposing?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. The beauty of South Africa is that we are a very diverse nation in terms of ideological orientation and many other forms of orientations. So being a diverse country is an advantage in that you are able to have somebody who's a pro-liberal and somebody who's anti-liberal, but they stay in one country. The trick here, I think we must learn from what the Communist Party of China has done. The Communist Party of China is a communist party, but it understands that until you reach the stage of communism, where there is only one class, which is the working class, until you reach that stage, you still have private sector or companies that are operational. So you can't do away with these companies right now. So what they did, they said this is communism or Marxism with Chinese characteristics. So they looked at their country and they said what is working and what is not working. And what is nice is that since 1994, we have adopted a more liberal approach to dealing with issues. And I think most of us, in terms of the statistics that are there, in terms of the reality that we see on the ground, is that those are not working for our people. They are working for certain individuals. There are individuals who are progressing in this country. I'll make an example. Johan Rupert. Johan Rupert, in a year, is able, in 3 months, is able to make billions of rands. So this is beneficial to him. But as a country, we need to say, of course, we are not against Johan Rupert. He's also South African. But is it proper that one individual or 2 or 3 individuals must actually reap the benefits of democracy, and the rest of the people must actually be crying? We must look each other in the face and say, this is not working for the majority. Whether it is, Makhele, you are an African Marxist or you are a pro-capitalist, but what is working, so that we can then be able to actually emerge out of this? Because obviously, the trajectory that we have taken since 1994 has not worked for the majority of the people. And I know people will easily say, no, you've been in power since 1994. You are a government. You've been in power since 1994. But that person must also be assisted in terms of actually understanding the intricacies of governing versus ruling. When you are governing, it is different from when you are ruling. I'll make an example. In 1995 already, the president of the country was Nelson Mandela. And Nelson Mandela complained as the president, he complained about the rate of transformation in the rugby. And then Louis Late disagreed with him, and he took Mandela to court. Are you going to say you are ruling when that is the case? You are not ruling. You are just governing. For example, the Solidarity as a union, because they've got huge capital, they are able to approach even the highest court in the land and oppose some of the progressive laws that this country has enacted, to oppose them, and they win in the courts. So we need to find a way of making sure that we get everybody along, we agree with one another to say this is our path, so that at least we know where we're going. At the present moment, there are too many differences, and we need a government that is able to rally all behind all of us. And they can use that through interactions, through stakeholder involvement, but also through laws, because there are certain people who are just not willing to assist the country to move forward. So what do you do with those people who are not willing to move? Then we assist them through legal tools.
Now, in conclusion of this discussion of ours, which is definitely not an end of discussion, but for the interest of time, I want us to, in fact, I want you to tell us as to who is the actual intended audience for these remarks you are making in this, in this policy proposal, that that, because it sounds like a policy proposal. Who is the intended audience, and what do you think the outcome will be once they receive this, these remarks?
Yes, no, you are very strategic and clever to finish the interview with that particular question, because I've always wanted an opportunity to actually narrate, especially what relates to what you have raised. Somebody will say, you, Makhele, are working in government. These issues, you should be stating them with those people that you work with. And the simple question is, we are members of the community before we are employees of government. So as a member of community, there are certain issues that you actually come up come in contact with, and then you raise them as a community member. Sometimes you'll raise issues and say, but government, you are not doing these people correctly as an employee of government. And that is the difference between a passive public sector public servant and an activist public servant. So I regard myself as an activist public servant. So being an activist public servant gives me a task and a responsibility to also agitate our people, because I'm aware that if we don't wake up and if the people are not aware that they've got power, then we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we may face civil wars and the like. So I'm actually making people out there aware that we can actually get out of this quagmire. And this lesson, I learned it from one Vladimir Lenin, who was the president of the Federal Republic of Russia at some point. And in one of his writing selected works, he said, if you want to agitate the people towards a particular direction, you need to raise their consciousness to a particular level. So I'm raising these views to members of the community so that they become aware and conscious. Because you know some of the media houses will only feed our people what they want to hear. That we are failing here because of ANC. And people get used to that and they agree that that is the problem. If the problem is ANC, why are certain people thriving under the same ANC and others are not thriving? So people need to know that we are being lied to sometimes, and they need to actually use that information at their disposal to actually say, no, but we need to wake up and actually assist our government to move in a particular direction. So it's intended to members of the community to raise their consciousness and to also assist them to say, we are our own liberators.
I hope, therefore, in addition, you can also deliver to the desks of the Premier, the desk of the important departments that you've mentioned there. This particular letter, they must read it in their email, they must read it on the desk when they get there, because they are very important policy proposals, which, if implemented, can have a direct impact on the lives of the people. Mr. Makhele, thank you very much, man, for your time. We appreciate the inputs that you've been making, and appreciate the fact that you had to rush out of a plane to come and conduct this interview with us. Much appreciated. Good luck for everything you are doing, and you have a better festive season than the okay, let me not do that. But yeah, have a good season. A good festive season.
I saw where you are going. No, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and very wonderful Christmas and Happy New Year to the Central News team, yourself, and the entire crew.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you.
Are we off?